Hey everybody, how's your day going? Day's going well here. Super quiet at school, of course. But it's raining and it's cool outside. I'm so happy. So I hope you guys are all warm and enjoying your day at home. I know most of you are probably sick of being home. And we are ready for you to come back. We miss you so much. So today we're going to start on chapter 4. Chapter 4 is called What Frightened the Fair Gwyn. Freak is not in my room for 10 minutes before he sets me straight on the Fair Gwyn. He's able to jump down the steps by himself, except it makes him sort of out of breath. You can hear him wheezing, or I guess you'd call it panting, like a dog on a hot day. He gets into my room and I close the bulkhead door, and he goes, "Cool. You get to live down here all by yourself?" I eat upstairs with Grim and Graham. Freak works himself up into the foot of my bed and uses a pillow to make himself more comfortable. It's pretty dim down here, only the daylight from one basement window. But the light catches just right, and it makes his eyes shine. "Graham must be your grandmother," he says. "Grim would be, I suppose, a sobriquet for your grandfather, based on his demeanor." I go, "Huh?" Freak grins and pushes back his yellow hair, and he goes, "Pardon my vocabulary. Sobriquet means nickname, and demeanor means expression. I merely postulated that you call your grandfather Grim because he's grim. Postulate means, I know, I say, which is a lie, except I can guess what it means and kind of figure it out that way. So how come you call your mom Fair Gwyn of Ayr? Is that a nickname?" Freak is shaking his head. I can see he's trying not to let on that he's laughing inside. "Guinevere," he says, catching his breath. "The fair Guinevere. From the legend of King Arthur. You know about King Arthur, right?" I shrug. The only King Arthur I know is the brand of flour that Graham uses, and if I say that, I'll really sound like a butthead. He goes, "My mom's name is Gwyn, so sometimes I call her the Fair Guinevere, or Fair Gwyn. King Arthur was the first king of England, way back when there were still dragons and monsters in the world. Arthur was this little wimpy kid, an orphan, and there was this magic sword stuck in a big stone, okay? The old king had died, and whoever could pull the sword from the stone proved he was the next king." Sorry, lost my place. "All these big tough dudes came from all over to yank at that sword, and they couldn't budge it. One day, this little wimpy kid tried when nobody else was looking, and the sword slipped out like it was stuck in butter. So he was the king, this little kid." Freak nods. He's really into this story, and he's making shapes in the air with his hands. This is the first time for me hearing Freak really talk, and right away I know one thing. You cannot take your eyes off of him when he's talking. His hands are moving, and he's like really seeing it, this story about the old king. Arthur's magical sword is called Excalibur, and the Fair Guinevere is this pretty girl who becomes his queen. Fair in those days meant the same as beautiful does now. Anyhow, Arthur got bored just sitting around, so he invited all the knights of England to come live in the castle. They all ate supper at this round table, which is why they were called the Knights of the Round Table. Every now and then, King Arthur would send them off on some special secret mission, which in the old days they called a quest. They had to slay dragons and monsters and evil knights. I assume you know what a knight wears into battle. I think so, but I like hearing Freak talk, so I go, "You better tell me." And that's when I find out he's so interested in some clanky old knights. Because Freak really lights up, and he goes, "The knights were like the first human versions of robots. They wore this metal armor to protect them and make them invincible. When I get my stuff unpacked, I'll show you the pictures." It's pretty amazing, really, that hundreds of years before they had computers, They were already attempting to exceed the design limitations of the human body. I go, huh? And Freak sort of chuckles to himself like he expected me to go, huh? And he says, the design limitations of the human body. You know, like we're not bulletproof and we can't crush rocks with our bare hands. And if we touch a hot stove, we get burned. King Arthur wanted to improve his men, so he made them armor-plated. Then he programmed them to go out and do these quests, slay the dragons and so on, which is sort of how they program robots right now. I go, I thought there weren't any real robots, just like in the movies. Boy, does that make his eyes blaze. Like, whoa, talk about laser beams. He is fuming, so upset he can hardly talk. Finally, he gets control of himself and he goes, I suppose I must make allowances for your ignorance. On the subject of robots, you are clearly misinformed. Robots are not just in the movies. Robotics, the science of designing and building functional robots, is a huge industry. There are thousands of robot units presently in use, millions of them. They don't look like robots you see in the movies, of course, because they're designed according to function. Many robotic devices are, in fact, sophisticated assembly units, machines that put together cars and trucks and computers. For instance, the space shuttle has a robot arm. Right, I say. I saw that on TV. Freak sighs and rolls his eyes. Ah, yes, he says, television, the opiate of the masses. For about the 11th time, I go, huh? Opiate, a drug, he says, massive, meaning large and heavy. Thus, television is the drug of fatheads. Opiate of the masses. You don't own a TV? Of course I have a television, he says. How else could I watch Star Trek? Matter of fact, I watch tons of Tube, but I also read tons of books so I can figure out what's true and what's fake. Which isn't always easy. Books are like a truth serum. If you don't read, you can't figure out what's real. This time, I don't say, huh, because then I might have to explain how I'm an LD, and reading books is the last thing I want to do. Right after trimming my toenails with a lawnmower, gargling nails, or eating worms for breakfast. Of course, Freak has probably already guessed I'm learning disabled. Because he'd had to look around my room and it isn't exactly the public library. I'll lend you some of my books, he says. Cool, I say, like that's just what I've been waiting for, another chance to prove I'm a butthead. Then we both hear at the same time, this voice calling his name. The voice sounds very worried. The fair Gwen, he says, I gotta beam out of here. I go up and open the bulkhead door. And his mother is in the backyard, and she's looking at the little red wagon. She catches sight of me, coming out of the down under, and it's like somebody shot her. Like she's scared out of her mind. Kevin, she says, I'm looking for a little boy. Freak is huffing and puffing as he jumps up the steps, and the fair Gwen grabs Freak and puts him in the little red wagon, and I swear she almost runs home. Like if she doesn't get away really quick, something bad is going to happen. Freak is in the wagon, and he's trying to look back at me, trying to shrug his shoulders, and let me know he doesn't understand what got into the fair Gwen, but I already know. It's pretty simple, really. She's scared of me. Chapter 5, Spitting Image. There's a place I go inside my head sometimes. It's cool and dim in there, and you float like a cloud. No, you are a cloud. The kind you see in the sky on a windy day, the way they keep changing shape, except you can't really see it changing, it just sort of happens. And suddenly you realize the cloud looks like a big hand with fat fingers. Now it looks like a catcher's mitt or a big soft TV set, like that. Anyhow, I went there right after the fair Gwen ran off with that look on her face. Like, what was he doing with my poor little boy, stealing him away in that wagon? What I do is lie on the floor under my bed, where you can just barely see the bed springs and stuff because it's so dark. And before long, I'm somewhere else. I'm floating. And it's so cool and empty in there, you don't have to think about anything. You're nothing. You're nobody. Nothing matters. You're not even there. It's a timeout. Except this time, I can't stay as long as I would like. Graham is knocking at my door, going, Maxwell, Max, are you in there? Please answer me, dear. It's very important. Yeah, right. But I wedge out from under the bed. There's getting to be less and less room under there. And I dust myself off and open the door. There's no lock, but Graham has this thing about waiting until I say come in. She makes a big deal about not intruding. Maxwell, she says, and she takes a little step inside the room, and you can tell, sorry about that. And you can tell she'd rather not be here. She makes this face because the place is dark and messy and probably smells like my socks. Max, dear, I'm sorry to bother you. You know I never come into the basement, but I just got a call from Gwen Avery, and it's important. Uh-oh, I'm thinking. Now the fair Gwen is calling up my Graham, probably to report a great hulking beast that lives in the cellar, and I close up inside, waiting for the worst. She called to say how sorry she was, Graham is saying. Huh? I guess she came to pick up her little boy. Is that right? You and Kevin were making friends? Making friends. What a dumb idea that is. But Graham gets her feelings hurt pretty easily, so I don't actually say that. What I say is, yeah, I guess so. Graham is uneasy. I can see her eyes flitting nervously around the room, like she's crossing the border into a really foreign country. This is as good a place as any to mention that even though Graham is my grandmother, she doesn't look like a granny. She looks more like a mother because she was, as she always says herself, a mere child when my real mother was born. Well, I get the impression that poor Gwen wasn't expecting to see you looking so big, and now she thinks she's offended you. Does that make any sense? I guess so. You know her, huh? Oh my, yes, says Graham. Gwen was a good friend of your mother's. They were both pregnant at the same time. Then later on, you and little Kevin went to the same daycare. Did you know that? I give a shrug because I don't really like Graham to know how much I remember about way back then. Graham is saying, she said she especially wanted me to tell you this, Max. She said she is delighted that you and Kevin are going to be friends. That's the word she used, delighted. And she's invited you to supper. First thing, without thinking, I say, do I have to? Graham reaches out and she puts her hand on my shoulder, real light and feathery. You can feel how nervous she is just to touch me, and how it makes her uncomfortable to have to look up at me. Because, did I mention, I'm a lot bigger than Graham. Bigger than Graham, too. Bigger than most people. Graham says, she feels bad about how she treated you, Maxwell dear, and she wants to make it up to you. You don't have to go, but it would be the right thing to do. It was no big deal, I say. She just ran away is all. I guess I scared her. Now she's got her tongue stuck, and you can see her swallowing in her throat, like her mouth is real dry. I'll just leave that to Gwen, she says. She is quite a remarkable young woman, you know, raising that poor boy all on her own. He's not a poor boy, I say. You should hear him talk. I think the rest of him is so small because his brain is so big. Yes, says Graham. Well, well. Graham is always saying that. Well, well, like it means something, which I guess it does to her. Anyhow, I agree to have supper with Freak and his mom, even though the idea of it makes me feel real tensed up, like there's a hand inside my stomach, and the hand is, you know, making a fist. It turns out not to be so bad. The fair Gwen, right away, she's beaming at me, bouncing around the kitchen and talking a mile a minute, so fast the words kind of smush together. So did Susan, excuse me, your grandmother mentioned that your mom and I were pals until she got married, and I never could abide in that way, and it seemed all crazy and scary. Is that okay with you? Is that okay? Won't you be offended? It's like this delay while I sort out everything that she just said. And I go, yeah, Grim told me. And the stuff about her knowing my father and thinking he was sick in the head, I decide no comment is the way to go. You were the cutest little baby, Gwen says. I remember it like it was yesterday. We were all of us living in the tenements in those days because the rent was so cheap and we were all just starting out. Freak is on the floor digging through packing boxes for pots and pans and stuff. He's almost inside this box. All you can see is his funny little rear end sticking out. You'd think he was maybe 2 years old. That's how small he is, until you notice where his leg brace makes this lump at his hip. From inside the box, he goes, "Hey, Gwen, leave the guy alone, okay? You're going spastic." Am I? Gwen asks. She's at the counter, going through drawers and looking for spoons or whatever. I'm sorry, Max. That is, I'm sorry we just got off on the wrong foot. It's just, you know. Freak's head pops out of the box and he's got this wicked know-it-all grin. What she means is, you're the spitting image of your old man. Gwen says, "Kevin, please." And her voice is real small, like she's embarrassed. Yeah, I say, everybody says that. They do? I shrug. Is it really such a big deal for a boy to look like his father? Which is a typical butthead thinking, because of course it's a big deal if your father happens to be in prison, which everybody in town knows about. It's not like there's any secret about what he did or why he's there, except everybody acts like it should be a secret. And the bigger I grow and the more I look like my old man, the worse it gets. You really knew him, I say? I mean, him and my mom, when they were together? Not very well, Gwen says. She's looking for a knife to slice open a pack of hot dogs. I never saw much of your mom after they got married. He made it difficult for your mother to have any friends. There's a knife on the table, so I pick it up and hand it to the fair Gwen. She doesn't flinch away, and I decide maybe she's okay. She's actually pretty cool. So, Freak is saying, when do we eat? My fuel cells are depleted. Supper is great. The fair Gwen makes this really tasty potato salad with spices and stuff. Way better than the mushy stuff Graham makes. And we have hot dogs fried in a pan with the buns toasted up butter crisp just the way I like. And 2 kinds of relish and 3 kinds of mustard and red onions cut up real tiny. We sit out in the backyard eating supper from paper plates, and Freak tells robot stories that are so strange and funny I'm laughing like a maniac, and then I'm choking and Freak is pounding me on the back. "Expel the object," Freak shouts. "Regurgitate, you big moron." And he gives me another thump and I cough up this yucky mess, but I'm still laughing too hard and my nose is running. What a goon. Except it really is funny. Me trying to sneeze a hot dog through my nose. And we're both laughing like total morons. This is great, Gwen says, looking at Freak and me. I'm so glad we decided to move back. It's like we're getting a fresh start. It's time to go home. Graham gets nervous if I'm not back before dark. Everything seems really great, just like Gwen says. Except when I lie down on my bed, it hits me. Boom. And I'm crying like a baby. And the really weird thing is, I'm finally happy. Chapter 6. Close Encounter of the Turd Kind. 4th of July, right? Everybody goes nuts. The dads are getting drunk and having their cookouts, and the moms are trying to keep all the brats from blowing their precious little pinkies off with cherry bombs. And the kids are running wild through the backyards. It's like no rules apply, and that makes everything real edgy. If you know what I mean. Like, let's have a blast and who cares what happens. Don't get the wrong idea. I love the 4th. It's just that people tend to get all choked up about firecracker holidays and they don't see what's really going on, which is why I say is the dad swilling beer and acting numb. That's the basic formula. Not that Grim ever swills anything stronger than root beer. No way. The poison never crossed his lips, he likes to say, even though I've seen a picture of him in the army, and it sure looks like a bottle of beer in his hands. And he's got that whacked by a hammer grin that dudes always get when they're drinking. Anyhow, this is the first year I get to go to the fireworks without Grim and Graham, which I've never understood because it's right down by the mill pond where I've been allowed to go for years. So why should it make a difference just because about 1 million people show up to watch the rocket's red glare over that smelly pond? The deal this year is that I get to go with Freak, which Graham thinks is a good idea because she's afraid he'll get crushed or something. She actually thinks that people are going to step on him, which just goes to show how brainless she can be sometimes and scared of everything. I mean, nobody steps on little kids down there, so why would they step on Freak? Turns out, the thing to worry about is not kid stompers, but beer swillers. Like I mentioned before, because Freak and I are still a couple of blocks away from the pond, just kind of easing our way along when these punks start mouthing off. Hey you, Mutt and Jeff, Frankenstein and Igor. Don't look around, I'm talking to you, boneheads. What is this, a freak show? I know that voice. It's Tony D. That's what they call him. They also call him Blade. He's at least 17 and he's already been to juvie court 3 or 4 times. I heard he cut a guy with a razor. The guy almost died, and everybody says the best way to handle Tony D and his gang is to avoid them. Cross the street, hide, whatever it takes. Yeah, you, he goes, and he's doing this hippity walk strutting along, and he's got these fancy cool cowboy boots with metal toes. Yeah, Andre the Giant and the Dwarf. Hold on a sec, I want a word with you. Only the way he talks, he goes, I want a word with ya. How's that? Except it's bad enough having to listen to the creep. I don't want to have to spell the dumb way he talks. Anyhow, big mistake. We stop and wait for Tony D, alias Bad News Blade. Got any dudes? He asks, pretending like he's friendly. He's a couple of feet away, but you can smell the beer on his breath. Also, it smells like he ate something dead. For instance, roadkill, but maybe that's my imagination. Pay attention, Tony D says. I asked you, do you got any? Freak, his chest all puffed out and his chin looks hard and he's looking right up at Tony D and he says, got any what? Tony D has his hands on his hips and his punkster pals are getting closer, working through the crowd. He leans over Freak and he says, boomers, you little freak, M80s, maybe a rack of cherry bombs. Freak starts to walk away, trying to walk faster than he really can, which makes his leg brace bump against the ground. Come along, Maxwell, he says over his shoulder. Ignore the cretin. Blade goes, what? And he moves right in front of Freak. You want to say that again, you little freak man? Excuse me. Freak says cretin, C-R-E-T-I-N, defined as one who suffers from mental deficiency. Hearing how little tiny Freak is dissing the fearsome Tony D, alias Blade, I can't help it. I laugh out loud. Tony D is looking up at me and he's showing his white teeth. I swear they've been sharpened to look like vampire teeth. I go, uh-oh, and start to get real cold inside, like icy. Because I can see that Blade is trying to make up his mind. Is he gonna fight me? Or is he gonna get it over with and kill me quick? Just then, I hear the whoop of a siren, and like a miracle, this cop car comes out of nowhere, heading for the mill pond. And Blade takes one look, and he and his punksters are out of there, burning rubber in their Reeboks. Freak goes, whew, that was a close encounter of the turd kind. And it takes me a second to get the joke, but then I'm laughing, amazed he can be so cool about it, like it was no big deal that Tony D was after us. You can take him, right? He asks a couple of minutes later. I go, are you kidding me? You can't just fight Blade. You have to fight his gang too. You mean you couldn't take him and I was giving him lip? That's about the size of it. Freak goes, oh my gosh. And he's shrieking and laughing and whooping it up so loud everybody is looking at us like we're total goons, which isn't far from the truth. Freak hasn't got his crutch tonight, just the leg brace. And he's laughing so hard he falls down. Not that he has far to go. Anyhow, I pick him up